Every year there seems to be a few games that surprise us, and while we go into each month with more or less a clear game plan, once or twice a year a title catches us off guard. That's how we feel right now about Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn, a new game by A44 and Kepler Interactive. We've been playing for a few days now, and here's the headline. The game is solid, way better than we expected. We'll be sharing our full review of the game once the embargo drops on July 17th, so in this video, we'll focus on what the game actually is, because truth be told, it doesn't have a ton of buzz, and that's kind of a shame. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and here's our hands-on preview of Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn. Let's address a few things right out of the gate. First and foremost, we are well aware that Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn is supported by Sweet Baby Inc. We're also aware that the company has a reputation for forcing political messaging and woke ideas into the games they support. We experienced none of that in Flintlock, and that's saying something because Livid, who is the one playing the game, would be the first to call them on that sort of force-fed writing. Second, the game has very little in the way of buzz or attention. It's not even the most followed title on its release day. Now, we are under no obligation to even create content about this game, which hopefully says something about its quality. Finally, for the purposes of this preview, we can only talk about the game up and through the first couple hours, but lucky for us, we played through the demo during the recent Steam Next Fest, so our first 2 hours brought us a bit further than most other players. Now, with all that in mind, let's start at the beginning. You play as Nor, a sapper and member of the Coalition, fighting against evils unleashed into the world once a magical barrier was destroyed. Your main mission is to kill the gods now running free in the world, but you don't do that alone. Alongside you is Enki, a god in his own right who will act as your companion and ally in combat as you fight through besieged towns and zones, freeing them of the god's grip. That context is really all you need to know about the game's story at this point. We wouldn't want to spoil anything in this preview. Now, what's shocking is everything else about the game, which, as I mentioned before, is solid. It's a really good foundation, and the game lives up to its souls-lite branding that's plastered everywhere throughout trailers and the game's website. Once you get through the tutorial, you'll be set on the main path towards destroying all the gods, but along the way are countless areas you'll need to explore and fight through if you hope to reach those major moments in the game's story. This is where Flintlock's combat comes into focus. Truth be told, there's more of an emphasis on action combat than Souls combat, so just keep in mind that this game is in no way trying to be Dark Souls. Your character, Nor, is equipped with a primary melee weapon as well as a primary ranged weapon. This is usually an axe or a hammer in one hand and a flintlock pistol in the other. See what they did there. You'll also eventually have access to a second melee weapon that you can cycle through during combat, important because of the various buffs the melee weapons provide, as well as the ability to slot secondary ranged weapons. Believe it or not, these aren't just more pistols, but are actually different weapon types like hand mortars or rifles that provide different functionality during the action. The kicker is you can't just pull them out whenever, they have limited ammunition, but being able to weave them into combat was a pleasant surprise. Your primary ranged weapon plays a huge role in supporting the melee combat, which often dominates the ebb and flow of the moment-to-moment gameplay, not only providing a huge amount of damage, but also interrupting enemies mid-animation. For every 4 melee hits, you restore a black powder charge, which allows you to fire your pistol again. So, it very much is a secondary weapon, but it provides immense value. As I alluded to, melee action is really the bread and butter of the combat gameplay. Fast-paced, offensive-focused engagements are really what cements Flintlock as an action game in my mind, because you're often rewarded for attacking first and asking questions later. That dynamic certainly changes as you start to encounter armored and then shielded enemies, and when that happens, you will have the ability to block and then parry and counterattack, but for the most part, that balance always leans towards rewarding aggressive play. Now, there is another layer to all of this. Enki, the only god you're not actively trying to kill, and he aids you in combat. While fighting, you can tap into his skills to curse enemies. Triggering his series of basic attacks will build up the curse bar on an enemy, and as you find new weapons and gain new skills, you can speed up this process even more. But to start, Enki and successfully countering enemy attacks are the main way you'll curse enemies. Once fully cursed, an enemy becomes vulnerable for a critical attack, which will outright kill smaller enemies and chunk major ones. Enki also has an active ability that players can unleash once they fill up the bar in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Consider this your ultimate that you can use when surrounded by enemies to deadly effect. Enki isn't just your token pocket god, he is truly your partner throughout the entire game, with his own leveling mechanic and skill tree that enhances and unlocks new abilities to aid in combat. The dynamic between Nor and Enki is actually one of the better things about the combat and the game in general, and it really helps the action feel unique. That relationship extends beyond the combat too. Early on, you'll learn how to rift travel, which allows you to quickly move between various points within the world. Think of these like shortcuts, mainly providing you with means of moving the story forward, but sometimes leading you down secret or alternative paths. Everything with Enki starts out a bit slow, but eventually, because of the way the game's progression systems work, Enki becomes an integral part of your playstyle. Now I say can become because Flintlock's skill tree progression system is exactly what we hope for when we talk about a game like this. It's a classic 3-tree system, but each point you invest changes something meaningful about the game. The nodes aren't bogged down with passive effects like flat increases to damage or crit chance, and instead, each point allocated unlocks a completely new aspect of your combat spread across 3 different functionalities. If a game is going to have traditional skill tree systems, this is exactly how we want to see them play out, with each point adding something meaningful to your kit and stripping away all that nonsense that just pads out the experience. One thing that we actually found pretty interesting about the game was how you gain experience, called reputation within Flintlock. Your actions in combat all add to a modifier, and so long as you don't get hit, that modifier continues to increase, rewarding you with more reputation. Once you get hit, that modifier disappears and you have to start all over, but it's an interesting way to deal with something so common as experience gain, a system we've seen for decades play out almost in exactly the same way in every game. Flintlock's progression system does go a bit deeper than that, and it's another one of the surprising aspects of the game. By saving hamlets and talking to the host, you'll gain charges to your healing flask. You'll also find iron, wood, and sulfur throughout the world, and you can use those to upgrade your armor and weapons. Your decisions early are important because resources are scarce early on, but do get more plentiful as you push deeper into the game. You can also find various reusable bombs out in the world. When you eventually find a copy of that bomb, it gains another charge, giving you even more flexibility in combat. These are just a few of the ways the game continues to push you forward, and while there are some flat stat increases with things like the weapon upgrade system, you're making enough meaningful decisions with your skill trees that all of these secondary systems feel just that, secondary. I wanted to end with what are essentially our first impressions of the game, and while we have pushed well beyond the first 2 hours at this point, there are a lot of things that immediately stand out about the Flintlock experience. First and foremost is our overall enjoyment with the game. We are genuinely having fun playing this. That needs to be said out loud because this one could have gone either way. The demo really didn't sell us during Steam Next Fest, and I'm glad we picked up the full game because it's substantially more enjoyable once you progress far enough that the moment-to-moment gameplay feels rewarding. Another important point, combat is fun, but by no means a gold standard. Flintlock is an action game with some Souls mechanics, such as unparryable attacks and the ability to perfect dodge incoming blows using iframes. That being said, the overall combat experience leaves a little to be desired. It all comes back to the animations, which aren't perfect. Incoming enemy attacks can often feel janky and unpredictable, which messes with your timing, and your own abilities all feel a bit floaty, never having that organic weightiness behind them. It's not terrible, and like I said, we do enjoy the game, but this aspect of it is certainly noticeable. Another thing that's apparent within the first 2 hours is the world design. Each of the areas you explore are much more dense than you might expect from a smaller game like this. Each of the distinct zones offers something different in terms of aesthetic, and even within the same zone, there's enough variety to keep things interesting. Because Nor has such incredible mobility, it's really fun exploring the world the team created, and her kit gives them the flexibility to build vertically, which you can almost fully traverse. Because of that freedom, however, it's almost more disappointing that there isn't more to discover within the world. The game is genuinely missing those secrets that make exploration worthwhile, and while there are certainly things to find, the game never really has those moments of pure joy finding something special because you were able to solve some environmental puzzle out in the world. It's a testament to how we feel about the rest of the game that this omission feels even more pronounced. Finally, to come full circle, the story isn't bad. The voice acting is good, the writing is superior to anything we were expecting from anything Sweet Baby Inc. had its hand in creating, and while it's not the most moving of stories, it's engaging enough that those of you that enjoy single-player narratives won't be immediately turned off. In fact, quite the opposite, you might actually enjoy it. So there you have it, our preview of Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn. Let us know what you think about the game in the comments below, and if you'll be checking it out yourself when it goes live on July 18th. Remember, our review will be out on July 17th, the day before, so be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.